Imagine a conscious contact with God so strong that no matter what you are doing or not doing, that no matter what your kids are up to or not up to, and that whether you've got the person of your dreams or they're just not cooperating, that you are happy, content, and at peace. A space where everyone else's thoughts, attitudes, and actions are beautiful and exactly as they are supposed to be. Well, this is the space where I like to play. My name is Misha Z, and this is today's Bitch Slap. Join me as I shed light on the thoughts, actions, and attitudes that are causing you pain, and we train our minds to go to the capital S inner self, the joy that is waiting for us, the God within. Recording in progress. Arlina A from Idaho. Welcome to the Bitch Slap podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. The accelerated path to peace.
That's right. That's right. Gosh, so many directions to go, Arlina. And we were just having an amazing conversation before I hit record. And we can talk about that in a minute. Everybody who's listening, bear with me as I gather my thoughts. I was an interesting bit for all the listeners. You were the first person to have me onto a podcast. So
you did great, by the way. I'm publishing it today. I can't wait to share it with your audience and everybody else.
Thank you. And this is going to be about you ultimately, but let's talk about me for a minute.
I'm tired of talking about me. How about you talk about me?
Yes. Was I unruly on your podcast?
A little bit, but it was fun.
Yeah. Good. Yeah.
I'm going to be unruly on yours, so it'll be fair play.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Were you like, I know that I loved the way you started the podcast as well. And I was listening to some of your episodes. I'm not sure if you do this with everybody, but you started with a speed round.
Yeah.
And
fun?
We made it through like 2 questions.
I know, it was hilarious.
It's hilarious.
I think I gave the quote and anyway, but it was so fun.
It was so fun. So you have had your podcast since June of 2016, 17?
Yeah, something like that.
2016.
It's been a while, it's been like 5 years.
Which is amazing to me, Arlina.
Me too.
Yeah. So how 5 years ago, sort of the podcast industry or whatever we want to call it is sort of coming online, and June, I looked up the date. It was June. I have it written down. June 2016. You're like, I'm going to start a podcast. How does that happen?
Do you know what's funny is this podcast was actually my second podcast.
What?
Yeah. My first podcast, I'm obsessed with Tim Ferriss at the Tim Ferriss Show. Great podcast. And he was talking about, he's from Silicon Valley. He was talking about, I worked in high tech startups and all that for 10 years. And I was sort of fascinated with the VC community, the venture capitalist community. And he was like an investor into a bunch of early stage startups that did tremendously well, like Twitter, Uber, Facebook. The likes of those companies. So he obviously did really well.
Yes.
But he talked about finding a niche and I'm a talker, and I told you before we started, you're going to have to wrangle me in a little bit, but
yes.
Being in the startup world as a salesperson, I sold enterprise level software to companies like HP and Sony and Amazon and all that.
Let me ask you a question in that regard. How long was your sales cycle when you were selling that, i.e. like introduction to close?
You're so funny. You're a business guy. So that's a very businessy guy question. So the sales cycle depended upon, the company I worked for and the product I was selling. So enterprise sales cycles can be like 2 years.
Yeah.
But it could also be like 2 days, depending on, how it is, like depending on the need and the product, right?
Yeah.
Like
if you get lucky. So I guess on average, I'm really curious. I did a lot of short sales cycle selling and home loans, right? So you were just
home loans. Yeah.
Yeah. Versus like I dabbled in some of the medium to longer sales cycle stuff, and I had no capacity for it. Like I was like, yeah, this is insane. I can't, like, I need answers today.
The payoff to high tech sales is like when I was working for HP, I actually worked at HP.
Yeah.
The sales cycle, my quota was like $7 million.
Jeez.
But I was doing deals that were 600, 700, 300, so it's all relative, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. So finance
figures out how to make life very difficult for the salespeople. Like they give you just enough to survive. But the thing is that when you're at the enterprise level, the commissions are really big.
Really big. So that was my next question. So that was what was your biggest, tell me the biggest sale and the moment that you knew, holy shit, this is happening.
Well, I was inside sales. So inside sales is typically small to medium sized business. And I worked with a field rep who closed the enterprise deals, but I was in a support capacity to the field guy. And so when we closed deals that were really big, you have that holy shit moment. It's going to be, so you get these commission checks that are like 20 or 30. I think the biggest one I ever got was like $32,000.
How fun is that?
That was ridiculously fun. I tell you what, though, I had a very interesting experience that it was almost like within the same week. I've been sober a long time and I've been working with lots of women, and I got this check and it was like this, oh my God moment. It was amazing. And I went shopping and, you got to celebrate a little bit. I don't celebrate with alcohol or anything. So I go shopping.
Yes.
Whatever. So it was not a big deal, but, the fanfare wears off very quickly because in sales, it's always about what have you done for me lately?
Oh my gosh. It's
right?
So fleeting.
Yeah, it's so fleeting. And then within that same week, though, I was at a meeting and I was in the crowd, right? I was in the audience, and a woman that I had sponsored, this is going to make me cry, by the way, I can already feel it coming. She got up in front of everyone to say that something I said helped her stay sober. And that leveled me. It meant way more to me than the money. The money came and went and didn't mean anything. But her telling me that I helped her stay sober, oh my God. I've been in Idaho for 2 years. So this had to be at least 3 years ago. It still brings me to tears because you want to know that all the suffering that you went through wasn't for nothing, and that your life has value and meaning. And that was it for me. That was everything. And I was like, oh my God, that just gets me to my core every time.
So good. Right. I think that's one of for anybody listening, right. Arlina's been sober for 27 years now and counting, one day at a time. Mm-hmm. And let's just qualify that you and I, with our long-term sobriety, are not representative of, or not claiming to be representatives of any sober communities.
My initials are AA, but I do not represent AA.
But we love recovery. I love recovery. So that's those moments. We help people, and I don't mean this egoically. I mean this from.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Like we don't even know how we're helping people, and I think if anybody trying to carry forward a positive attitude or a service-minded mentality, like I'm always pleasantly surprised when I get that feedback that you're talking about. I know, me too. I'm like, wait, what? Really? I did what? Yeah. So, and I can be so hard on myself. So it's always nice to get a little feedback. But all right.
Listen, so I'm not going to pretend like I did it from like I do it because I need to stay sober. Like I was taught that you got to give it away to keep it. And I'm very selfish and greedy. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I want to, but I really do come from a heart-centered place, and, financially I'm fine. It's like, I don't need to always, like I do coaching, but it's more like my coaching is more about sobriety through self-esteem building, right? I will be like, go to AA for free. If you can do that, go do that.
Yeah.
But I also am aware that there, especially women who have like religious trauma or trauma around men, they don't want to go to like a male-centered program. Like all the literature, God is he, religious, number one, or God-centered. And then everything is written in like he format. Like there's a chapter to the wives. It's like,
the old language is amazing.
I know the old language. I used to say in the beginning, it's like, if you have people have a hard time sleeping, just read the big book. Put you right to sleep.
Oh my God. So good.
I actually love the book of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah.
It's magical. That and the 12 and 12, magical.
Yeah, magical. Speaking of, I have a question for you, which I was going to say for later, but I want to get to it now.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a man, and like I'm just a white male, right? I'm 52. Like speaking of the big book or the AA literature, like that's all written towards me. So
yeah,
I love the way you frame that. Yeah, as a woman looking at it from that, it's like, yeah, it's pretty male, God centric, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, or the dogmatic, if you wanted to take it that way. But
which I didn't have a problem with it at first.
Yeah,
I still don't.
Yeah, me.
Yeah, you either.
Yeah, me either. Surprise. No. Well, I did. I lived in San Francisco Bay Area for a number of years in my mid to late 20s, and I was very active in recovery there. And for a while, the Bay Area, obviously.
Great recovery in the Bay Area. There's like 800 meetings a week. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's probably more than that, to be honest.
Yeah. So I would hang out at there was this one meeting in the Castro it was called the Our Lady of Safeway. The Our Lady of Safeway. It was right by the Safeway in the Castro. And anybody listening who hasn't been to San Francisco or know about the Castro, that's your more gay area of town, right? And I don't even know if I'm allowed to say that anymore.
It's the fun side.
Yeah, the fun side.
The
yes.
fun side. The flamboyant side.
But
you can say whatever you want. That's the good.
I know, right? I love it. I'll just claim ignorance. I don't know.
We love it.
But very contentious about the way the big book was written. That was the point of that. Like there was a lot of young, non-straight, right? So there was lots of and then just progressive, politically progressive, whatever. So there was always a lot of awesome debate around the freaking big book. But
take what you like, leave the rest.
Take
right?
what you like, leave the rest. So this is my question to you. So as a man, like when my parents died in my young to mid 40s, like it really forced me to start thinking about death, right? And I've noticed, and I want you to tell me if this is true or not, and you'll get the question here in a minute, but I'm like, I think because women bring life into the world via babies and all that, and men don't, I think men tend to have, I'm going to just swear, I'm going to say death fucks with us a lot more than it does with women, that idea. And I'm going to say it's because women get to bring life in to the world. So you have more of this connected sense. Would you agree with that? Or is that just?
I mean, I don't really like to generalize men and women a whole lot. I think it's very individualistic. Like if we're talking like, wow, you just went for the heavy topic of death right away.
Do it.
I love it. Let's just get into it. Listen, when it comes to things like death, it really like as a mother, like you're afraid that your children are going to die, right? Or, so I think it maybe death will manifest, like fear of death will manifest for women differently, possibly. But I am not so connected to this, the being the vessel of life that it would abstain me from having fears around death.
Okay.
But having said that, I don't obsess about death the way my husband does.
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah. So little confirmation bias for you if you need it.
Yeah. Well, no, I think it's interesting. It's an interesting question. I ask it of people now and then, and I don't know if people, not that they should, but they might answer it like you have, or whatever, or not really have given it a lot of thought. So, anyway,
that's a very interesting question, though, because some of the Stoic philosophy, I forget what the actual quote is, but it's like every once in a while you sort of meditate on death, and what that really does is it amplifies life.
yeah.
Right? We are here for such a short time. And as men and women, our purposes are kind of different. I've been really in touch with my male audience that is into this idea that their value is based on provide and protect, that they don't have, somebody recently told me that men don't have any inherent value, women give birth, right? And nurture children. But what I have found is that, men are in this mindset of the warrior mentality, that you have to be like the Navy SEAL Jocko Willink, or like this badass warrior, like a fighter, right? And be willing to sacrifice. In our culture, the men are considered disposable because they're, who goes to war? It's the men. I mean, they don't let the women go. That's kind of a thing. So let's just say it for what it is. But historically, it's like men are disposable, like the Navy SEALs are disposable. Like their value is in being the martyr, the protector, the provider, right? And so I think it's so important to have the conversations around what is our value. Our value is, there are the warriors who are able to confront intimacy, or have those difficult conversations that require vulnerability, or, men have value in a multitude of different ways. But, there's that, idea that comparison is the thief of joy, right? That it sort of feeds into this imposter syndrome that we all have as men and women, right? The social media, we compare our lives to everyone else's highlight reel, right? And so it's so important that we really do the internal work to recognize what our value actually is, right? To stay, focus on what you think about, you bring about; what you focus on expands. So, we do have like a negativity bias, where our minds are sort of drawn to the negative, right? But we also have to be very mindful and intentional about focusing on the positives, right? In the program, we're taught to look at our character defects because, we're often in crisis mode, right? Look at your character defects, find out where the problems are to solve them so that you can have a better life. But what's included in having a better life is focusing on your assets, right? So giving equal time to both, I think, is important. Actually, I think it's more important to focus on what you're doing right so that you can do more of that.
I like that. Yeah, I think it's an interesting, it's so important when we first roll into the rooms to look at those defects, because they are wreaking havoc in our lives and everybody else's lives. So we have to have that honesty, right? And that what's the word I'm looking for?
It's like the open-mindedness and the willingness.
Yeah. And it's like, the get out of denial. So the acceptance of like, what type of a person am I? And it's not to beat ourselves up, but it's to reset and be like, okay, like, it's not the world, it's me. Right. And then I think moving past that, I love what you said of, all right, now what are the strengths? What's the shininess, that part of me that I can like look at and love and nurture? And I definitely think in recovery that's missed sometimes.
Yeah. It's, they talk about the, like in the 10 step, the assets and liabilities, right? It's important to just look at it objectively. I'm of the mindset that everyone's doing the best they can with the information that they have. Right. And that we're all working from this operating system that is our subconscious mind that was developed in childhood. subconscious beliefs about who we are, what we deserve, and what we're capable of, right? And what is the world? Is the world this generally safe place, or is it a dangerous place? And then we operate from these presuppositions. It's actually your brain's way of being efficient, right? Your subconscious mind is filtering out, like, I think it's like 4 million bits per second about this information that's coming in. So your subconscious mind has to be able to filter out stuff that's not necessary. So it's an efficiency thing, but we are all doing the best that we can. Right. So it's the idea of doing the inventory isn't so that we can beat ourselves up, like you said. I mean, if you think about that idea about how we beat ourselves up, it's like if we expect ourselves to run a marathon with a broken leg. Right. You can't hate yourself into wellness. It doesn't work. It's ridiculous, but that's exactly what we do. Oh, I'm such an asshole. I'm an idiot. Oh my God. The inner dialogue, the inner critic is the inner critic is just ridiculous. So, the whole idea around step 11, the prayer meditation, it's to give us a little pause between the thought and the response, right? Yes. So that we can learn to respect. We are not our thoughts. It's like our brain's job is to think. That's its job. So it presents all kinds of crazy ideas, but we don't have to attach to those ideas. You are not your thoughts. We get to choose with intention what we put our, thoughts and energy into.
Yeah. You said that trying to, as men and women, like finding our value. What is our value? Like tell me more about what you see your value is. And I guess my question is, go ahead.
This is fun. So I'm going to present a tool. It's an idea.
Yeah.
It's called, if you spot it, you got it.
Okay.
And this is your tool for evolution. And the first thing people do, when I present this idea, people are usually really offended. They're like, the idea is that you can't love or hate something about yourself unless it's something you love or hate about someone else. And people focus on the negative and they say, well, like, I hate child molesters. I'm not a child molester. I mean, they go to like the worst possible thing.
Of course, the far extreme, right?
Yeah. So, but in many cultures and in many ways, we know this to be true. If you point your finger at someone in blame or judgment, you have 3 fingers pointing back at you. Yes. The pot calling the kettle black.
Yes.
So there's many people are just mirrors. They're merely reflecting back to you what you love or hate about yourself. It's like, if you spot it, you got it. But this also works in the positive. Think about the people that you admire. So when you ask me, like, what are my assets? I think about the people I admire. Right. And so that's how I can identify. And sometimes that is also hard to take, because if you're coming, like when I showed up to the rooms, it's like, I hated who I was. I hated myself almost my whole life until I got sober and was taught how to sort out all my emotional baggage. That was like a big ball that needed to be unraveled. Right. And I finally found a system and a process. Like the 4-step inventory was magical for me, because it helped me sort out all my stuff. It helped me to let go of what wasn't mine so I could bear the weight of what was.
Yeah.
Right. Like I saw that I had this pattern of in our household of taking inappropriate responsibility for someone else and no responsibility for myself. So I learned to flip it. It was like you were talking about denial earlier, and I was giggling because I was just having a conversation with somebody about making the poppin' sound. The poppin' sound is, and I have to say it that way because when I was a little girl, I was a cheerleader for a police athlete, Pal Warner leagues. And there was this coach who used to regularly tell those boys, make the poppin' sound, son. With the Southern accent, it was hilarious. It burned in my psyche forever.
Yes.
What's the poppin' sound? It's like the sound that you hear when your head comes out of your ass. It's like, or in a more spiritual way, it's when the veil of denial is lifted. I thought the poppin' sound was funnier though.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, the denial. But the reason that we go into denial is because we cannot bear the pain that we are enduring. We have no way. I was not taught coping skills. So I had no tools to resolve my pain to resolution. I didn't have any emotion management skills. Right. And that's what I learned in the rooms. And then, so as I felt safer, working one-on-one with another woman. I had a sponsor early on, and I would tell her I would share the things I was ashamed about. And I could see it in her eyes that she got my kind of crazy and that she didn't judge me for it. And she met my shame with empathy.
Let me just interject something really quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anybody like a sponsor in recovery is like a mentor, right? It might be like, yeah. So that is, if anybody listening was like sponsor.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
A sponsor is really someone who takes you through the steps. That's all. They're not a finance person. They're not a therapist. They're not a counselor.
Yeah.
And the way to find a sponsor is to look for somebody who has what you want so that you can just do what they do.
And I'm going to even take it one step back from there and say that in recovery, there's all sorts of recovery programs out there. There's Gamblers Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Meth Anonymous. I mean, the list of stuff is beautiful, right? There's plenty of stuff to get addicted to, but and there's all these programs. A common theme within them are the steps. So it's typically a 12-step program, and so we'll do the steps to hopefully be free of this addictive compulsive behavior. So when you say the steps, we're talking about
the 12 steps.
The 12 steps, which could be in any sort of recovery program, or even I'm sure Tony Robbins has his stuff and he's got, here's your steps to X, or any coach out there, or there's all sorts of
recovery I think requires a specific set of steps. And don't get me wrong, I love me some motivational speakers, coaches, all that stuff.
Sure.
But what's interesting about the steps, the 12-step process, is it doesn't matter what the problem is, the solution is the same. The solution is simple, it's spiritual, and it really has nothing to do with the problem.
Yeah.
Right. Because the problem is just a manifestation of a deeper issue. Right.
And so when you say the problem, you're talking about if you're going to gamble, if I'm a gambling addict, the illusion is that it's the gambling that's the problem. But
right.
Go on.
That's just how the problem presents. But we're really talking about all these different things are distractions. Their obsession, addiction is all a distraction, and it's distracting from the pain, right? Like Gabor Mate wrote this book, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, and he asks not to ask why the addiction, ask why the pain. Like, where is the pain coming from? So here's what happens. When we are having all this pain, we disassociate from our feelings. We disconnect, disassociate, deny, suppress, right? And so we become numb to our own feelings, right? So what ends up happening is that stuff happens in life and we're not connected to. How can we tell people how to treat us when we don't even know ourselves how we need to be treated? Because we can't feel anything, right? It's like our feelings are all askew. Our dopamine reward system is all askew, right? Our brain, everything's all a mess. And so when you show up to these programs, they help you sort all the stuff out. They help you focus on the pain to resolve it, right? It's about pain resolution so that you don't feel the compulsion to use whatever your drug of choice is, whether it's drugs, alcohol, sex, shopping. The list is really endless.
Yeah.
The distractions are endless.
Turns out.
Right.
I've had experience with so many.
I do.
So I thank you for that. Let's get back to I loved if you spot it, you got it. And I like to think I'm wise, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I never even thought about the other side of that. Like, who do I admire? What do I think's cool about somebody? So go on, tell me more. Like,
isn't that great?
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you for that.
It's amazing. And it really just speaks to the limitless possibility that is available to all of us at any time.
Yeah.
Right. Like Marianne Williamson has that quote that our greatest fear isn't that we're small. I forget what exactly it is. Our greatest fear isn't that we're small or fragile or whatever bad.
We're scared to shine. We're scared to just let it rip and just be.
Our greatest fear is that
lights.
we are brighter beyond imagination.
Love that. So tell me, for you, like it sounds like you've contemplated, all right, if I spot it, I got it. You see some things about so tell me, what do you think? What was my initial question is, what is your
Yeah.
value? Or
Yeah.
what do you like? Let it rip. Now's your chance to tell me.
Yeah. I mean, so there's a couple things.
Okay. Yeah. Turns out.
It turns out there's a couple things.
Yeah.
My ability to recognize where I'm making mistakes turned out to be my superpower. Right. It's like noticing where, like not being afraid to fail, not being afraid, because I am not what I do always.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so here's an interesting idea. My sponsor sort of presented this idea that recovery is about recovering our whole selves, the good and the bad. And she challenged me. She said, can you love your unlovable parts? What she was asking me is, could I meet my deepest character defect with empathy and compassion? That's heavy, right?
Yeah, that's good.
That's good.
Yeah.
And so that's been a chat. She threw it out one time and I latched onto it. I'm like a pit bull when it comes to if these ideas, that because it was so transformative for me. It's like, so you also cannot escape the same measuring stick that you judge others by. So if I'm judging myself for or others for their character defects, if I'm judging others, I'm really judging myself.
Yeah.
Right. Because I'm seeing something in them that I don't like about me.
Yep.
Instead of treating them with compassion. The reverse is true as well. It's like I have all kinds of judgments about myself, about feelings that I have. I'll have a feeling, I'll think a thought, and then I'll have a feeling, and I'm like, I shouldn't be having this thought. I shouldn't be having this feeling.
Yeah.
Right. And that's like the George Orwell, you get in trouble for your thought crimes. Right? I didn't actually do anything, but I'm condemning myself for my thoughts and my feelings.
So
what
good.
Is that?
What is that?
What is
or
that?
Like, I'm sure you've been sober long enough. I shouldn't be thinking this.
Yeah.
Or right? Like,
oh my God, when I turned 20, what I didn't expect was how much shame I felt for not being better yet. Still human, as it turns out.
Okay, so there's two things I'm going to keep picking at you about. So let's start with, so who do you admire? Tell me the top person that comes to your mind. Who do you admire?
I admire Oprah.
All right. What do you love about Oprah?
I just love how real she is, and how she brings so much value. Listen, Oprah practically raised me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, she had her show for like 25 years, and I was like a young adult when her show was on, and I felt like she practically raised me, because she gave me all these, you're laughing your ass off. She presented all these, she introduced me to all these teachers that have blown my mind and totally transformed my world. Marianne Williamson, Gary Zukav, Deepak Chopra, Wayne Dyer.
Gary Zukav, the Dancing Wooly Masters or something.
He wrote a book called The Seat of the Soul that was all about intention. You know, just magical, like all these people. And she was talking about things that nobody talked about before. And she helped guide people out of their suffering. And that is now my mission in life. Like I left the corporate world, I left the money, and I'm like, I could not live any longer not being aligned with my purpose, which is to help others. Right? Like, if you've ever been to hell and found a way out, you reach back for the people who are still suffering and be like, oh my God, it's so unnecessary. It's so unnecessary. It's unnecessary. I mean, pain is inevitable, but how you deal with it is optional.
Okay. So Oprah's real. She brings.
She's funny. Very personable.
Personable. What does she bring? You said she brings.
And yes, I'm aware that all the things, I know.
I'm loving it. That's why
I am those things.
You are. It's amazing.
I don't have her bank account, but I have a big heart like she does.
Clearly, you're funny as can be.
Oh, thanks.
You're welcome. I think you're real. I like that too.
Yeah.
All right. Who else? Go on next. Who else after Oprah? Number two.
like all those teachers that I shared with you,
Pick one and tell me. Just
I
pick the next
loved
person.
Marianne Williamson. She does lectures on A Course in Miracles.
Uh-huh.
I loved how she was really funny too. She was so practical. Like the practical solutions that she offered. Like I'm a science girl. I'm all about just, I would hear things like, oh, all you have to do is, you just do the work. What is the work? What's the work? Tell me what, like, I need specifics. I need something, a concrete, actionable.
Some steps. Yes.
I had some
the action items, right?
Yeah. I needed some action items. I needed to-do lists. I needed action items. I needed, you know what I mean?
Right,
I love a to-do list. Oh my God.
Nothing like a good to-do list. Tell me your favorite, a male that you most admire.
Oh, there's so many. I'm one of those women who loves men. I love men. So many. Oh God, who comes to mind?
What do you love about men before you tell me?
I mean, the whole idea of, men are simple and they're funny. Like I raised two boys. It's like, they're not complicated generally. They kind of are who they are. They're not putting on they're not trying to impress. Men and women are very different from like a primordial standpoint. Women are smaller in stature and not as strong. And so women had to be like, strategic. And I don't want to say sneaky and conniving, but whatever. But to survive, we had to use our wits and be strategic and cunning, right? To survive, right? Because do you know what the number one cause of death of women is? Men. Men.
It turns out again. Oh my
Turns
God.
out that's true.
It's true. Holy shit. Excuse my language.
Yeah. Well, why be shy about your language now?
Why be shy about it now?
Your podcast name is the Bitch Slap Podcast.
Oh yeah, right. Oh yeah.
I took issue with it first, but I was like, I don't know. It's kind of good.
Okay, other than the fact that men are the main cause of women's death.
Of death for
what
women.
What do you love about men?
But I love them anyway. Y'all kind of screwed up the whole entire world, but I'm just saying, I think the women need to turn at the wheel. We would end the forever wars like today.
It's true. I'm in. I'm ready.
I'm ready. I know. I think we all are. But no, I jest, but like Gary Zukav, who wrote The Seed of the Soul, what a sweet soul. There's so many of my favorite teachers are men. I loved the work that Deepak Chopra has done about mindfulness and awareness. And if you look at his life, what he actually did, he was like the chief of staff he was an MD, and he was chief of staff anyway, he had a big position. I'm getting the title wrong. What do medical people do when they're like the boss at the hospital?
Yeah. They're
chief of medicine.
The what?
Chief of medicine, maybe.
Chief of medicine. Yes. Yeah.
Chief of, right.
Yes. I know.
He was like the top dog at a hospital, and he gave it up, and he walked away from it because, what a brave and courageous thing to do, to follow his path. And he's done some really cool stuff. I love the meditations, and he's been doing this work for many, many years. I have a CD set with Wayne Dyer and Deepak Chopra when Wayne Dyer had hair. He's another teacher that I really admire. You mentioned Tony Robbins earlier. Yeah. Had I not, he was kind of one of the first guys. I was introduced to his work before I got sober. And that was the first time that the concept of change your mind, change your life was introduced to me. And I really latched onto that. Made perfect sense to me, that your brain, your mind, and your emotions are running your life. And if you learn how to master your mind and your emotions, you can you can guide the direction of your life. Right. And that was the first time. So all the stuff that he, later in life, there's some stuff that has come out that I don't really, but you know what?
Get in line.
Yeah. Love and compassion, right? It's like nobody's perfect. We're all doing the best that we can. Listen, I don't know if I would do well in the situation where he's in. Like, I don't know that my ego and all that stuff would do very well under that kind of adulation and admiration and magnitude impact.
I think it's interesting too how like he is just human like the rest of us, and finding that, just what you're talking about, that compassion, like what's the, in spite of or because of his intricacies, he's helped and still helping
millions of people.
I mean, come on, can we cut him a little bit of a slack, right? And I say that to myself. I'm like, I think
that's
about
the thing.
Yeah.
You spot it, you got it, right? It's like he's having this huge impact on the world, and that I truly admire.
Yeah.
Is he human? Yeah, he really is.
Right?
Yeah, nobody escapes this life without some issues. I mean, it's just, but he overall is helping a lot of people. So that I appreciate.
Who's the biggest pain in the ass that you see in the world right now?
Oh dear. I mean, I don't want to name names. Our politicians. How about that? Just the whole thing. What a hot mess. What a hot, stinky, sticky mess that is.
Yeah. That's not really a very spiritual question. I just had to ask it. I was just like,
but it is a spiritual question because you know what? Because if I am committed to this idea of if you spot it, you got it, I have to look at that and go, where in my life am I being dishonest? Where in my life am I being self-seeking? Yeah. Where in my life am I looking for personal gain at the expense of someone else? Yeah. You know, I have to be very careful about those things. So like I really don't, you know, it's sort of a funny thing. Like when I made the jump to being a coach, it's like, you know, I'm not trying to tell anybody not to go to AA, but I'm aware that there are people who don't want to go there. So what are we going to do for those people? Are we going to just be like, oh, AA is the only way? That is not the case. Over the 5 years that I've been doing the recovery podcast, I have learned that there are many paths to recovery. There are many, there's refuge recovery, smart recovery. There's all kinds of programs. Like I developed a little 30-day challenge.
Jesus.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in the church. That didn't work for me. There's
I'm having fun. I say that with an open heart for anybody who follows Jesus. I just couldn't resist. I know but let's be real. The church helps a lot of people. It does. It does, right?
It does. That's what Celebrate Recovery is. Celebrate Recovery is faith-based.
Yeah.
Yeah. So many paths. Addiction is a very complicated issue. It's very complicated.
It's very complicated. There are so many. I think that it's a habit a lot of us in recovery have is to become very myopic as soon as we land in recovery and supposedly get better. We're like, oh, we've got the keys to the kingdom. We know the way. We've been given the gift of awareness. It's like, you're just getting up to baseline. Like there is so many people doing so many good things. It's just right.
We're just getting up to baseline. That is hilarious.
Yeah.
But listen, someone's got to be there to hold the net. You know what I mean? People from falling too far.
I definitely want to talk more about that. If you spot it, you got it. And I think we should delve into that more. And I like the way you framed the politicians. So it's not like, because people have a habit of being like, well, yeah, what about the child molester? It's like, well, I say, well, yeah, well, what about the child molester? What is it that you
have an answer for that?
What's that?
I have an answer for that.
Tell me, let's hear it.
Because that's the first thing. That's like the worst thing. A child molester is, number one, somebody who's sick, right? Or somebody who's imposing their will on someone else for their own personal gain.
Yep.
Have I done that? Absolutely. I've not molested a child, but I have asserted my will onto someone else, right? For my own personal gain. I've done that. It's disgusting. You know, it's at the essence of it is a self-seeking, it's a sickness, right? And so I'm an alcoholic. I've, struggled with like love addiction issues prior to sobriety. And it crossed over into my recovery, using people to make myself feel better, right? Like, intrigue. I think I interviewed this lady on my podcast. She's a Hollywood actress who talked about her SLAA, Sex Love Addicts Anonymous journey.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating. She gave words to things that I didn't know. And I really attached to the love addiction part. Sex was a part of it, but the love addiction, it served to distract me from my pain. I lived in fantasy land. I used other people, right? And it made me so sick I wanted to die, right? Those behaviors led me to that dark place of wanting to die, right? That's the whole thing about addiction, and that disease is it will kill you. Right. It doesn't matter what the thing is. It leads to this place where I'm broken. I will never be fixed. It's hopeless. Right. It doesn't matter what the addiction, it all leads back to those same feelings.
Yeah.
Right. And so, when you talk about if you spot it, you got it, and you think about like the worst people on the planet, what is the essence that we're talking about? The essence is, it's not the actual act, although, it's deplorable and it ruins lives. Murder ruins lives. Stealing people's money ruins lives. I mean, but anyway, what I'm saying is that yes, at the essence, we are all basically the same. We're doing the best that we can with the information that we have. We're all walking around with wounds that need to be healed, and nobody really knows how to do it. Right. Yeah. However, there are teachers who are bringing light and love into the world. There is a solution, every problem inherently has its own solution. Right. And so the answers are out there. Talk about Jesus, seek and ye shall find, come boldly to the throne. I grew up super church. So I'm familiar with all the dogma and the doctrine and the Bible verses. And it's so interesting how science is now explaining why those ideas and those paradigms are set up to support us. Right. But our, human minds we're attracted to, we have this negativity bias. We have a confirmation bias. That's why the political thing got so weird. People only, they make a decision and then only look at the evidence to support their position. I don't care what side you're on, right? There is no side. We are all in the same damn boat, right? That's the thing.
Yeah.
But we, as human beings, look for separation. It's like in the Course in Miracles, they talk about it's either love or fear. Right. There really is no separation. That is the illusion.
Yep. I love that.
Yeah.
I think too, if you think about murderers, right? Like nobody's guilty, right? Like this idea of sin and guilt. If you want to talk about A Course in Miracles, right? They're like, yes, sin is an illusion. Guilt is an illusion. And you're like, yeah, well, what about murderers? And you're like, well, that's an interesting question, right? And so I can't believe I just went down this path.
There's a degree though, if you don't mind me, you said something about sin. Sin is an archery term. It means that you missed the mark. So it's not something that this higher power wants to condemn, right? It's you missed the mark. It's really about cause and effect. Let's treat this as a science experiment. Instead of making it personal and you're a bad person and assigning guilt and blame and shame and all that stuff, let's just look at the facts. Let's just see things as they are. That's what acceptance is. Acceptance is let's just see things as they are. And let's look at the causes and conditions so that we can go back to cause and effect, so that we can look at the cause and think about what other actions could we take. That's why we need each other, because even in and of myself, I'm doing the best that I can with the information that I have. So I need new information. But oftentimes people are not able to move to the solution until their feelings and their pain is validated. It's acknowledged and yes, I could see how you would feel that way. Of course you feel this pain. I could see that, seen, validated, heard, and then we can move. Okay. And then it's now what? Then what? Okay. So we see your pain, we validate it. It's real. Now what are we going to do? There's an acceptance piece. You feel your feelings and, you don't want to move to solution too fast. It's called spiritual bypassing, right? We don't want to do that either, but we do need to, and that's why we need each other, right? Like I can try to validate my own pain. I do the Tara Brach rain meditation every morning, and rain stands for recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. And that's literally my process for, helping me, myself, and I process my negative feelings to resolution, right? It's that self-care, self-acceptance, self-compassion practice that I have to do for myself so that I can then move towards what is it that I do want? What am I going to be intentional about this day? What am I going to focus my attention on? Because that's our greatest manifesting tool, is that visualization. Like, what is it that you do want? That's a more interesting question than what's wrong with me. Do you think?
Yeah.
Like better question. Ask better questions. I mean, not you, but we need to ask ourselves. Sure. You're interviewing me. I'm telling you to ask better questions. No, that's not what I meant. That's not.
All right. Okay. Are you ready for this one?
Yes.
At 27 years sober, what do you think that people just won't understand, or they'll be like, if I really told people my thoughts on that, they'd think I was crazy? Or
well, you're talking about vulnerability, right? And transparency, and that requires a lot of courage. And my suggestion is, you don't want to tell everybody everything, right? There are certain people you tell certain things to. We need to first know that we are safe to share our truth, right? You need to find somebody who listen to the way people talk about others, because that says more about them than it does other people. If you have people in your life, you realize, I have never heard them say a thing about anybody else, that's the person that you want to talk to. That's the person that is you're probably safe to share your stuff with, right? But you do, we do tell everybody, you're only as sick as your secret. So you do have to share those secrets.
Indeed. I'm thinking more of like, I appreciate that. And it well deflected, by the way. So I'm going to ask you again.
Okay. Sorry.
That's all right.
I told you got a ring on me.
No, I appreciate it. I think that's great. I think that was,
I may have missed the intention of the question.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm like,
try me again.
Yeah. You're 27 years sober.
I am.
You are. Yes. I love that. You're verging on 50.
I'm 52.
52.
Same as you.
Yes, that's right.
We're samesies.
Yay. Those glasses are amazing, by the way. I can't wait till I repurpose this content and people can see how amazing those glasses are.
I didn't wear my contacts. I was like, are we doing this on video today?
It's all good. It's kind of fun. They're fun. They're super fun.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
So 27 years sober, 52 years old. I think being 27 years sober, and obviously you've been active in recovery for 27 years. And so that implies spiritual progress for 27 years. And so I think somebody who's been progressing, perhaps inches, perhaps miles, depending on the day, year, week, month, whatever, decade, you are going to have some spiritual awareness and growth. And so is there something where you're like, I don't talk about this much because I think most people just won't, they'll think I'm crazy, or they'll think I'm...
Oh, you want me to divulge my worst secrets?
Take it however you want. Sure. Yes.
I mean, there's lots of things that I think I have lots of unpopular opinions. For instance, I hate it when someone is sharing their, like at a meeting in real life, in person, when someone starts to cry. I hate the tissue distributors. Do you realize how much work is required to get to the place where you can finally connect to your feelings and something is emerging and it needs to come out and it's coming out through tears, and people are in like this trance where they're finally processing their negativity, and someone shoves a tissue in their hand and
they can't take it. They can't take the emotion of the other person, perhaps. Go on. I didn't cut you off. Go.
It disrupts that person's process and they stop. And I'm like, you fuckers.
Thank you.
That's my judgment, is that just let people cry. When they are ready for a tissue, they will ask for one.
You know what? That is actually genius. I love that.
I hate
Thank
the
you for that.
distributors. Just stop it. Let your codependency just feel your own damn feelings. I know it.
Yes.
I know there's good intentions behind that. I really do, but I just hate it.
That's a good one. Continue. Tell me
Mhm.
what else? What else?
Unpopular opinions. I really do think that the women should work with the women and the men should work with the men, because I've seen way too many men prey on the women. And I'm sure you see the women prey on the men, but I'm coming from the viewpoint of the woman. I see the damage that it does to the women when they come to me.
I'm in agreement with you. I think that yeah, yes. Absolutely. I think sometimes the guys are delusional about about that they're the prayer, but
Well, the thing is that let's go back to we're all doing the best that we can with the information that we have. But when you know better, do better.
I love that.
And the other thing about the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, which I love and helped me, not all meetings are created equal. Some meetings are very sick. Some of the people in the meetings are very sick. And so, you need to be on guard when you go to some extent, like get to know people before you start trusting them. Right. And, talk to the people who've been around for a long time. They can help you navigate the landmines. Another unpopular opinion, especially in the 12-step community, is that AA is not the only way. People hate to hear that. But I have seen people treat AA like a religion. It is not a religion. It's not, but people treat it as such. And that really ruffles my feathers, because everybody is different. Addiction is a very complicated issue. And people we are not doctors. It's not okay to tell somebody to stop taking medication. We don't take nothing no matter what. That's insanity. If you don't want to take medication, then don't take it, but don't tell somebody else that they shouldn't. Maybe they need it. Maybe they have a chemical imbalance. Doesn't that make you crazy? It's like, who do you think you are? We're not doctors. The doctors.
I'll tell you, my favorite thing is this.
Okay.
This is my favorite.
We're talking about pet peeves.
Yeah. And I used to be one of these guys.
Uh-oh.
The answer's in the big book, God damn it. Right? Like anybody's like, I'm thinking about delving into broader outside ideas, and it's like, answers in the big book, God damn it. My opinion on that now is that the answer is indeed in the big book, which is actually telling you to go look outside of the big book. Ironically, anyway.
Ironically. Yeah.
Ironically.
I mean, there are many answers. All the answers are in the big book, but I might not be in a space. Like, we have to meet people where they're at. And what I learned,
again, go ahead.
Yeah. We have to meet people where they're at. And if somebody is trying to address recovery and they're addressing it with sexual trauma, religious trauma, that's a thing. Religious trauma is a thing.
Absolutely.
And all you hear is God and, all this stuff. People are like, they shut down around that. They don't feel safe. And so they need a place where they can feel safe and process their feelings.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not one solution fits all. It's not a thing.
It's not one solution fits all. That's good. Are you ready for the next one?
Okay.
I'm going to tell you an experience that I have, and this is related to recovery. So when I was 5 years sober, I used to talk a certain line of in hindsight.
Sounds
bullshit,
juicy.
Right?
Okay.
In 10 years, then I would be, this was my main theme, or 15 years, 20 years, 30 years. And so like at 10 years, I looked back at 5 years and I was like, I can't believe I used to talk that shit. Right?
It was true for you at the time.
Right. Well, I'm interested for you. And I say that with love, not, my question to you is, like, what do you look back on and you're like, oh my God, what was true for you at the time where you're like, what was I thinking? Huh?
Wait, were you facepalm? You're like, oh my God.
Oh my God.
Well, there was a period where I thought I knew better. Like, I was confused about my role as a sponsor, let's say, where I thought I knew better than they did about themselves.
Mm.
I was like, if you would just submit to the process, if you would just surrender, if you would just look at your character defects, if you would just, you know,
See
at the
things
end of
my
the,
way.
yeah, I know it's not embarrassing. What I learned with some maturity in recovery. By the way, you said something about recovery, progressive recovery, or something like that. In different areas of my life, I have evolved, and in some areas, I devolved.
Yes. Thank
Right.
you.
We are now, you know, the AA symbol, the circle means constant and the triangle means change. We are always changing.
Always changing.
We are either evolving or devolving. You are not the same today that you were yesterday.
Yes.
Right. So the work to be crazy is the same as the work to growth. So you might as well just submit to the growth work. But yeah, I used to think that I used to think that I knew better for other people, and then I realized that I had it was like a self-righteous thing that I had, but when I go into that self-righteous place, I'm no longer useful, and then I'm separate, and that makes me sad. I don't like separate. I like people. My disposition is happy, and I love people. And coming from this place of, I think I know something because I've been sober for a while, that makes me separate. And I get in trouble when I'm alone like that.
Thank you for that. Yeah. I love that. I mean, I hate it when I'm there.
I hate it, but I love it. I know. Recovery is full of paradoxes like that, isn't it?
It is.
You hate it, but love it.
Do you anything come to your mind for your biggest lesson at 5 years in recovery?
At 5 years, you know, I'm terrible when it comes to like timelines like that. I hardly remember where I was when I was 5 years sober, to be honest.
It's fine. How about 10 years? At
10 years sober, no, nothing. I got nothing.
Okay. You know what's great? We got a long way to go. Yeah, how about 15 years?
I mean, I can tell you. So I'll just give you 20. At 20 years, I kind of alluded to it. When I turned 20, my overwhelming feeling was shame that I was still, that I wasn't better yet. That was the thought that came up for me. And I was unprepared for that kind of shame. I was like, oh my God, at 20 years sober, I still have judgments. I still go, the character defect. We're very character defects focused. And that's when I started leaning towards, we need to be more focused on our assets, right? My idea of a higher power had changed tremendously. And, that has evolved over time as well. But I remember specifically at 20 feeling shame that I wasn't better yet.
How was that manifesting?
It was like, the anniversary of, they call it a birthday, but the anniversary of my sobriety date was coming up, and people tend to be reflective around that time. And, you look about how far you've come, but I was looking at how far I needed to go, or how long I had been wrestling with the same damn issues. Right. And what I learned is that,
I'm laughing.
Did you have a question?
So good. I don't know why I love this. Go on. I'm just.
Yeah. So I was like still wrestling with the same issues, and I was having shame about it. And what I have since learned is that, your brain has what in neuroscience terms is called the default mode network. And the default mode network is like your set point. Right. And it's developed from childhood, and it's sort of like your brain's operating system. And whenever you try to break out of this default mode network, it's always a constant struggle to break out of your default setting. Right. And, your default setting is sort of like this comfort zone. You don't get too high, you don't get too low. You sort of live in this comfort zone. And when you try to break out of that comfort zone, what happens to your subconscious mind is it starts to serve up all your worst doubts and fears because it knows where they are. Right. And so then we kind of get stuck and complacent, and it keeps us safe. The intention of the subconscious mind is to keep you safe. Right. And the best predictor for future behavior is past behavior. Right. So it knows that if you keep doing what you've been doing, you'll just keep getting what you've been getting, which in a way keeps you alive. right? But we get to the point where we just can't live that way anymore. We have to evolve and grow, right? But what ends up happening is like we're served up all our doubts and fears. And so what I learned was a process to mitigate those doubts and fears, like recognize it for what it is. And I actually have a worksheet that's like a writing process. I, again, will refer to Tim Ferriss because he did this TED talk about not defining your goals, but defining your fears. Like, what is it that you're really afraid of? Make a list of all the worst possible. Like if you're got to make a decision about something, what is the worst possible outcome that could happen? You list all the outcomes. And then what's your mitigation plan? What's your plan to mitigate the worst possible things? And then you have a contingency plan.
Move to Florida, change my social security number.
Hey. Yeah, that could be a thing. I don't know about that.
But you ever have, I don't know what when it can get wonky in recovery, right? Yeah. I'm for anybody listening, I've been in recovery for decades, but it for me, it's not like I'm going to go drink and do drugs or gamble or whatever the old behaviors are. I'm leaving the family and moving to Florida, changing my social security number. That's my bad behavior.
Yeah, cut and run.
Yeah, cut and run.
Well, that's also like a fight.
I haven't thought that for a long time. I was just having fun.
Well, okay. Well, we'll let you pass then.
No, go ahead. Tell me. You can answer the question.
So that's just a process I learned. I learned to address and mitigate my fears so that I can live usefully. Yeah, get it out of my head and onto paper, and start rewiring your brain is a thing like that. It can actually be done. Yeah. Right? You got to quit the drugs and alcohol. Mood follows action. So there's a lot of things that we can do to change the way we feel and how we behave, and therefore the outcome of our life.
So 20 years, you're like, man, I'm not as far as I thought I should be. I'm hard on myself. I'm still, and perhaps it is also the awareness of like, God, I'm still judgmental. I really need to change that. Or God, I'm opinionated and perhaps I don't know what's best for other people. I need to change it. So, so it sounds like you, and it's self-evident, I believe, that was a growth point for you, perhaps a bitch slap time of your life where you're like, God, I gotta change.
I've had many of those wake up calls or bitch lapses.
Yeah.
Do you want me to share my most recent one?
Yes, please.
Oh my God. So you and I were talking before the podcast that my youngest son, we just put him in rehab. He was displaying some disturbing behavior around drugs and stuff. And so we had to go through this, and what a wake-up call that was. I mean, I look back and I didn't realize like how asleep at the wheel I had been, just talk about a change of lifestyle when I left corporate and started to, run my own business. It was overwhelming at times. And I was kind of in this, the trauma response of fight, flight, or freeze. I was in freeze mode. Right. Like I was still producing my podcast. I was still servicing my clients. But there was like all this stuff that I wanted to do that I was just so, like the social media marketing and putting out content and just, trying to find how am I going to serve is the question. And I was so overwhelmed with different options that I just was kind of in this freeze mode. And then this experience with my son, I was like, oh my gosh, I've been asleep at the wheel at home. Like I have a little workaholism thing, little checker outer thing. So that was brought to light, all that stuff. So that was like a really, really big wake up call. So what I've done in response to that
when was that brought to, you mean like recently? You're like, wow.
Well, like last week.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Like last week, like I am awake. So awake. I was like, and I do whenever I'm in, I've had challenging things through the 27 years, many, many challenging things over the years. And what I know to do is to double down on my self-care practice. So for me, that's about connection. It's about service, introspection. I do have a sponsor. I have a coach. I have other people that I'm accountable to. So I started doing a live group meditation that I'm hosting Monday through Friday, because I was really squirrely. I was having a hard time submitting to meditation. As it turns out, I was trying to avoid my feelings. So that's why I was distracting so much. And I had this sense of, why am I distracting so much? How come I can't tolerate silence? It's like every waking moment was filled with like learning a podcast, learning a training thing, learning, I'm obsessed with audio books and podcasts, and I'm always feeding my brain. It's like another addiction. In the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, it's to be in service. But really, I was not addressing, just regular stress. And I was really having a hard time submitting to my self-care practice in the morning. So, like I said before, all the information is out there for free, but applying it is the tricky part. And accountability for me is I will often do for other people what I won't do for myself. Right. So that's why I started hosting a live meditation Monday through Friday, so that it forces me to submit to the process, because I will show up for other people and not myself sometimes.
What you cool thing about recovery is it does teach us how to, and I know this is not unique to recovery, so I'm not trying to imply that at all, but it's like the miracles that come out of these heavy times, these bitch slaps, these growth opportunities. So your son, who's 17, right?
Yeah.
As of this recording, last week goes off to treatment, and by the habits that you've developed over the years, you're already starting to see sort of like the miracles, perhaps.
Yeah.
Is that a good way to say it?
Sure. Yeah.
Tell me about
drastic change in the way I feel, the way I'm thinking, the way I'm perceiving the world. It's just been it's been like, I don't feel like humbled. I'm aware that some people might be like, you couldn't even get your own kid sober. You like, how did you let this happen in your own house? Like, I was actually in denial. About my kids. Like they were, my kids never leave the house. They're just kind of that, like, they're video game guys. Like they don't, so they were not participating in sports or things like that. So they would go to school, the private Christian school. They would go to school. They would come home. That was pretty much it. Like, they never went anywhere, did anything. So it wasn't like I was worried that they would be drinking, but lo and behold, I found out that, my older son had smoked weed one time at school when he was doing tech theater. And then my younger son, almost like I said it out loud and people were giggling like, oh, she thinks her kids have never done anything. And turns out they were right. I was not aware of all the facts, let's say. And that's when I found out that my younger son had been smoking weed, which was my personal favorite. When I was a teenager his age, if I was awake, I was high. I was smoking weed quite a bit. So just like, I was thinking that because we were like, oh, it looks like addiction has missed our children. Maybe we were the ones who broke the chain. No. I mean, one can hope.
One can hope.
I looked good for a while.
Right? I was a great parent for a while.
Damn it.
That's amazing. Thank you for that. Oh my God.
Yeah, but I'm awake now. And what I'm awake to is my codependency. I'm awake to the fact that I was paralyzed by fear that I wasn't even in touch with. I was in denial and I didn't know it. I had like this weird awareness. I'm like, why can't I sit in stillness? Why do I always need to be listening? Like, the TV always has to be on because I like the noise. I have this hobby of cookie decorating. I'm amazing at it because whatever, I don't do anything in half measure. So now I'm obsessed. I started a cookie company called Bite Me Custom Cookies. Isn't that funny? Bite Me Cookies.
It's
because
amazing.
Yeah, I'll send you some pictures. You're going to be like, oh my God, you really are amazing.
Yeah, please
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like if you go onto Instagram and look up cookie decorating, just the hashtag,
Yeah.
you will see amazing. There are these women out there and some men too who they're like little creations that are like, oh my God, that's a cookie. People eat, nobody wants to eat the pretty cookies, which is why I hand them out to all my neighbors and everybody loves me. Because I give them cookies. I'm the neighborhood cookie lady. But I'm like a drug dealer, but it's sugar and it's free. So there's that. I hand out free, beautiful cookies. Everyone's like, oh, they're too pretty to eat. I'm like, no, bite them. They're screaming, bite me, literally.
That's genius. Oh my God. And now you've got them all. Pretty soon they will be begging to pay for them. Right.
And well, anyway, that's the whole thing. It's good to have a hobby, but I noticed that I was like obsessed, like I was going way overboard. Right. And I don't do anything in half measure. So that was not unusual for me. I used to do.
You can't just bake a bag of, what are they called? What was the Toll House cookies? No.
No. No.
I got a company. I'm scaling.
Yeah. I had a Mother's Day flash sale. I made $200. Amazing. I can retire now. It's like, wait, what is that? 1% of my annual salary from corporate?
Paralyzed by fears. So you implied that you have awareness around some fears. So tell me some of the fears that have come to light, if you can.
I'm not sure I can, but so it was weird because I like had this weird, I was like, I'm really indulging in this cookie thing. I can't sit still and meditate. I'm always listening to podcasts. There's like a dozen podcasts that I listen to. I'm always feeding my brain, but it felt like a distraction. And there was some part of me that was aware that what am I distracting from? Like what's going on here?
More will be revealed, right? It's a cool
I think
space.
More will be, because it's early, right? Like my son just like this all came to light like last week.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and that's when I was like, oh my God, I've been asleep at the wheel. I think it's one of the things is though, I grew up with performance-based approval, achievement-based approval. I'm an achievement junkie. And the money was definitely, I was making a lot of money, and that was definitely validation that I was a worthy person, that I was okay. I have always sort of operated from this place that I have to do twice as much just to be half as good. Right. And so, and it's really been in recovery. It's really been about recognizing that I am good and lovable without doing, like when my baby was born, he didn't do anything. I loved him. He didn't do anything to deserve my love. I just loved him. That's just how it was. I just did. And so I have to look at myself like with that same love and compassion. It's like, I don't have to do anything to be valued. Right. But it's so entrenched in my brain that I have to achieve to be accepted and loved, and it's never enough. It's never enough. And you know what my theme song is? The Home Depot's More Doing. That was my theme song. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm exhausted, Misha. I'm exhausted. Yeah. I just want to just give myself that same love and compassion that I gave my baby when he was born and hadn't done anything yet. Right. And so I think maybe because I left corporate, I was in this transition mode. It's like, how am I going to feel it? You know what I mean? It's like that default mode network. I'm trying to break out of it and I'm just paralyzed. It's hard. All this stuff is not easy, but yeah, I think lots of beautiful lessons. You're right. It is a miracle. I mean, I realize it right now in this present moment that, I needed something to wake me up, and that's the beautiful thing about these kinds of things is that everybody gets to benefit. He's going through a scary time, and it's a painful lesson, but it feels like growing pains rather than destructive pain.
I like that.
Yeah.
One of the really cool things I think about being sober a long time, I'm going to switch gears a little bit.
Sure.
Okay. Is that, and again, being in recovery, or like I'm assuming the same thing happens for anybody who's been in church and committed to church for 20, 30, 40 years, or they're for a long time, right? Or whatever they're in, but in recovery, being committed and showing up in a program for 27 years, you've got to see some amazing things and some tragic things. So I have two questions. What's the biggest explosion you've seen of somebody in the rooms? Like, and I think to frame it for people who aren't in recovery, like when we see people melt down, oftentimes lives are on the line. And I do say this so we can laugh about it, but maybe it's a twisted question, but please answer.
Well, I'll tell you, I actually wanted to tell you a story in the very beginning, because you were kind of alluding to how did this podcast thing come about? And I kind of went left and didn't really tell you the story, but this relates to the question that you just asked. So I started my recovery podcast because a friend of mine died. She was at the 6 a.m. meeting, and she was dead 3 hours later. And what ended up happening with her is that she was experiencing, she had some outside issues. She was having insomnia. She had chronic pain. Chronic pain is a very dangerous place for people in recovery, because doctors, man, if you have chronic pain, go see a board certified addiction specialist, because all the other doctors have little to zero training when it comes to addiction. Like I've had many people over the years with chronic pain relapse, and some have died. So Gina was one of those people who she had chronic pain and she was not sleeping. And when you're so sleep deprived, it's just as dangerous as if you've been drinking. And she was in a single car accident and she died. And she and I were about the same age. And talk about a wake-up call. I was doing this podcast on high-tech sales. There was no women-led high-tech sales podcast. And so I was in the startup world, and I was asking some of the questions like that you asked me earlier. It was based on, some people, when people hit home runs, what is that experience like? So that's kind of what the premise of the podcast was about. And but it was on my heart to do a recovery podcast, but I was terrified because I thought the people in my community would be angry with me because of the traditions. The traditions state that we'll maintain our anonymity at the level of press, radio, and film. And so that was what was holding me back from doing it. And then Gina died. And I was like, what dreams died on her heart? You know what I mean? It's like, if I died tomorrow, I would regret not sharing. It was just really like this calling that I had to do the recovery podcast. And so after that happened, and I named my podcast based off of that 6 a.m. meeting that I was going to every day. When people are showing up at 6 a.m. to go to a meeting, that filters out a lot of bullshit. And it sort of distills these people who are so wise and loving and supportive and caring. And so it really attracts people who are very serious about their recovery. Right. And Gina was one of those people, and she had some, man, that insomnia and chronic pain is so scary. And she didn't survive it. It's so sad.
So sad. So that's a big explosion. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm on my heart, obviously, to lose friends in recovery is quite a thing,
I don't know if you heard this, but I heard this when I first got sober. They said, if you stay in recovery long enough, you'll go to a lot of funerals. And that has absolutely been my experience. I've been to more funerals than I care to admit to.
Yeah. So how long, we'll close the loop of the inspiration for the podcast. So Tim Ferriss, if I can fill in the blanks, you're in tech sales, you're like, hey, there needs to be more women-led podcasts about this. Yeah. So you were inspired to take action. And then how long had you been, is that right? I don't mean to.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Yeah. Perfect. So I was like, I'm going to do a woman-led podcast.
Yeah. And so what year was that? I mean, that's, God bless you. Like I'm like to be.
That was probably a year before that. I probably podcasted for the sales podcast for about a year before I did the recovery one.
Cool.
Yeah.
And So then your friend, what was her name? Gina?
Her name is Gina.
Gina,
Yeah.
passes away, and you're like, God damn it, I'm gonna start this.
I'm going to do
What
it.
was called the ODAT chat, one day at a time chat podcast. So June 2016, you started, and
I changed the name recently to the One Day at a Time podcast because apparently I didn't know this. I didn't do any kind of research or surveys. Apparently, I know. Apparently, ODAT is not a commonly known acronym for one day at a time. And people also spell it differently for whatever reason. Some people leave out the A, ODAT.
Yeah.
Instead of ODAAT. So anyway, it was problematic for a variety of reasons. Nobody knew what ODAT meant outside of recovery, but everybody gets the concept of one day at a time. So that's why I changed the name of the podcast.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Because I do want to talk about that podcast in a minute, but I want to do after the biggest explosion. I think the other amazing thing about recovery, again, or 12 steps, and it could be there's so many 12-step programs out there, but is this rebirth that we get to be a part of. And any rebirth come to mind that you got to experience or be a part of?
I mean, so the lady that I talked about earlier, she mentioned that something I said had helped her, and that meant everything to me. Right. I mean, I've seen stuff like that over and over. Like we see it on the daily. Like we don't realize how many things actually go right. You know what I mean? Like there's 1,000 things that go right every single day.
It's amazing. Right? Thank you for that.
Yeah. Why are we not celebrating all those things? It's like I check off my to-do list and the only thing I look at are the things I haven't done. And I feel shitty about those things. I don't celebrate all the good things that I did. But in terms of like witnessing miracles, man, I've seen some crazy ass people show up with anger issues, mental illness issues. They're just, people are just like, there are some people you just give away and then their lives change. Like I've seen people like drastically lose weight. They were so like, in their sickness that their bodies were not well. And then some people are unrecognizable. When someone goes, "Hey, Arlina, do you remember me?" And I'm like, "Who are you?" And then they start telling me stories and I'm like, "Oh, you're you? Oh my God." It's like you were unrecognizable from the person that I knew a year ago.
Unrecognizable. It's quite a thing, isn't it?
Yeah. It happens all the time.
All the time. On the daily.
Time.
We just see it. It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
Unbelievable. So I am fascinated being a fledgling podcaster myself. I'm like, wow, Arlina started, I guess turns out June-ish 2015. So you're already on podcast number 2, renaming your second one. But now, like, we've got everybody and their dog, and someone said to me, and their cat making a podcast. And I would say you're probably on the front end of that wave, right? Like,
I'm not. Yeah, I have. So here's the funny thing is now that I'm in this world, there are like dozens of people who started five years ahead of me.
Yeah.
5, 7, 10 years ahead of me.
Yeah.
Right. And so here's an interesting perspective is that everybody's worlds are really small. Like there is so much out there that we are unaware of.
Yeah.
Right. Like we get into our little worlds and we think that that's mainstream. It's not like our little worlds are so small. There's so many people that are out there. There's room for us all because mainstream society is still thinking that drug and alcohol addiction issues are a moral issue. Like, that's crazy to us, right?
Crazy. Yes.
Like how do people still think that?
I know, right?
Well, most people don't suffer drug and alcohol issues. Like you said earlier, we're just coming up to baseline.
Yeah.
Right. Like people who are at baseline are unaware of all this other subculture stuff that's underground communities. Right. Yeah. But we're bringing all that stuff to light.
Yeah.
Now.
Do you think the proliferation of podcasts as you're seeing it is, I don't know if helping is the right word, or is it bringing more attention to you, to what you're up to, or do you think it's diverting from what you're up to?
Um, I'm sorry. Can you ask me the question again? I just got a text message that I'm alarmed about.
Oh, yes. Read it for us.
She said, I'm running 5 minutes late. Are you able to join? I'm just waiting.
Oh, uh-oh.
Oh, sorry. Apparently I had another appointment I forgot about.
That's right. We were getting close to being done anyway. You want to text her really quick? Hold on.
Yeah.
I'm in this incredibly engaged conversation.
Hold on. Sorry. There you go.
Yes. So I was saying, I think for you, the arc of 5-6 years, I mean, that's cool. So, I like it. I think it's a fascinating thing. It's cool.
Yeah.
But I was saying, do you think the proliferation of podcasts now is bringing more attention to what you personally are doing in the podcast world, or is it diverting from it?
No, I think it's creating. So it's interesting because people think of competition as a bad thing, but really what it's doing when multiple people are doing the same thing, it actually creates a market. Right. It creates space and awareness to the entire issue, which is, we're all trying to find ways to overcome addiction. And really what we're saying is we're all trying to present solutions to emotional pain, mental health issues. And right now we're coming out of COVID kind of, and, there's a lot of mental health issues that have been brought to light. So many people are struggling. And so I'm kind of the abundance mindset. Like there's enough crazy to go around. I can only handle so many.
It's beautiful. Thank you. I was going to ask you about your husband, Bob. I think you said his name was, but he's got some long-term sobriety. We don't need to get into that. I think we've actually checked off most of the questions that I had written down. And
awesome.
Yeah, I'd ask you more about your podcast, but I think I will just encourage people to go to go check it out, the One Day at a Time podcast. And I have you're all up to all kinds of cool stuff too. I written down, where was it? I think, and it's what you were talking about earlier. It's your Brainwashers Club.
Yeah, launching the Brainwashers Club, which is a membership site. It's, we do all this work to raise the level of our self-esteem, but the idea is that you wouldn't go to the gym once and expect to stay in shape forever, right? Maintaining this level of self-esteem requires ongoing, attention and nurturing and investment. So the Brainwashers Club is really a hub where people can go to utilize tools. There's a live events calendar. So all the information is out there for free. Applying it is the trick. And so that we have a calendar of live classes that people can show up to. It sort of invokes, community, accountability, service. And it's where we do work in the meetings. So instead of having to do homework, we do stuff together. We apply it together.
Cool. Where would you like to tell people to find you out there in the interweb space?
I would say go to soberlifeschool.com. That's kind of my main hub. You can find the podcast. You can find the self-esteem class that I do. There's a 30-day sobriety challenge class. I'm launching a men's confidence class. Financial insecurity and personal value and all that stuff is really, I found important. Men present differently than the women do. Women present with like self-sabotage and relationship issues and weight issues, and men's have a lot of that too, but it's a lot about financial security and image and trying to identify their value and gaining clarity behind that. So, cool. But Sober Life School is the main hub.
I love it. Yeah, this has been awesome. It's been a lot of fun. We covered lots of bases, and I believe by divine intervention, we managed to close all the thought loops.
That is insane.
That is insane.
Good job. Good job, yes. Podcast host.
Yes, thank you. And it happened naturally. That was amazing. Well done. What else? I think Arlina, did I miss anything? Was there anything that you're compelled to say before I hit stop?
I just want to say thank you for all the work that you're doing. I know this podcasting is no easy feat. So, and I know it's a passion project, but it's good that we're all, trying to be of service in whatever ways that we feel led to do. So thank you for all the work that you do. And thanks for letting me participate.
Indeed. And I look forward to being on your podcast again and having you on mine again at some point. Yeah. Arlina, I'm going to hit stop and then we'll say goodbye offline.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
Yep.
Thank you for spending time with me today. As someone who is committed to growth and service to this world, I so appreciate your willingness to come with me, go within, and serve our world through change. If you found value in this podcast and you know someone who can use this message, share this episode with them. Share it so our mission can be achieved one episode at a time. And of course, subscribe so you can hear more. And lastly, for more resources on what has helped me on my journey and can help you on yours, go to belove.media/resources. That's BELOVE.media/resources. Thank you again for listening.